So good to be here with you. It's always a privilege to be able to come and speak and share with you all. So thank you for this opportunity. We're in our second week now of Authentic Community, and I thought it might be a good chance before we get too far into to kind of kick around the idea of what authentic community is. I know for me during the week I've been playing around with what it is and trying to figure it out a bit more, and a few people I've spoken to are kind of asking, what is authentic community? So I thought it might be a great opportunity just to unpack it, play around with it, and see what we think. So just turn this on. Firstly, authentic community. We know what community is, hey. We live in community. The people that are here with us are a community. We're in the community of Beenleigh, Southeast Queensland, and that's our community. But the problem is when we throw the word authentic in front of it, it kind of, it plays around with that kind of idea a little bit. And so, I was thinking about what makes us authentic. Is it because we're real? Is it because we're genuine? Is it because we're honest? And so I thought, what's real community? And we're real, aren't we? We're not fake. We're in community, so real community. But that doesn't make us authentic. We could have honest community. So I could stand here tonight and say, well, Pete, brother, honestly, you smell a bit, But does that make us authentic? That doesn't make us authentic, does it? What about genuine community? You might come up to me and say, well, Bill, you've been preaching tonight and you're telling us to be genuine, and, well, your preaching genuinely sucks. So, there's different ways that these words can happen, and to get authentic, sorry, I should say, all these words have something to do with authenticity, don't they? But they're missing something to make it authentic. What about me preaching? I'm standing up here. What makes me an authentic preacher? I've got this little thing here so I can speak into. I can walk around. That makes me pretty authentic, doesn't it? I can use my hands so I can communicate well and do all things. I've got this, and so I can put up graphs. I can put up the world. I can put up Greek. Does that make me authentic? They're all good things, aren't they? They're great things as a preacher, being able to communicate and do different things, but there's something missing, isn't there, that brings authenticity, I keep getting that word wrong, authenticity to what we're trying to say with authentic community. And I think a lot of it comes down to a verse that Pastor Steve shared at Leaders Connect. And it's John 13. A new command I give to you. Love one another as I have loved you. So you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another. You see, all those things, the being real, the honest, genuine, if we bathe them in love for other people, all of a sudden things become authentic. And you see, love is a powerful thing, isn't it? We have 1 Corinthians 13 that provides this amazing description of what love is. Love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast, it's not proud, it does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. Keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, and always perseveres. And in fact, earlier in 1 Corinthians is even a more telling verse, I think, and especially for any of us who speak to someone else. It says, if we speak with the tongues of angels, but have not love, we're like a clanging cymbal or a ringing gong. What's the gong? I can't remember the gong part. Anyway, clanging cymbal, and that's a real that's a really telling thing for me. Someone who's standing up here before you, but even in our personal one-on-one conversations, if we don't have love as part of those conversations, then they're not authentic, and they're not what God would have of us. And so I've been kicking around a definition for myself. You don't need to take this as gospel or anything, but I would encourage you guys to work through your own definition of what authentic community is. For me, it's interacting in love. It's listening, it's speaking, it's acting, it's giving in honest, real, genuine love. And you know what? I'm not going to get that right 100% of the time, but if I'm acting in love with you guys, then hopefully I'm going to be humble 100% of the time, and you guys will be able to speak to me, and we'll be able to work it out, and we'll be authentic community in that way. Anyway, kick that around for yourselves during the week, because as we move through authentic community, it'll be really good for you guys to think about what authentic community is to each of you. All right. So we better get to what the actual topic is tonight before we talk about authentic community too much. Matt sent me a text a few weeks ago, probably 5 or 6 weeks ago, and he said, "Do you want to preach?" And I'm like, "Yes, yep, I'd love to preach." I said, "What topic is it?" And he said, "It's on being generous." And hesitantly, I texted him back, and said, money? And he's like, "Yeah." And you could go further than that if you want to, but, particularly money. And so, I think money is one of those things that, doesn't conjure up great thoughts for us. And probably a lot of people this morning opened up their bulletin. They saw, all right, Bill's preaching, and so they were 50-50 whether they were going to come tonight. And then they saw it was on why giving, and that dropped down to about 10%. They're probably busy or they've done the giving thing before. They understand the giving thing. And so, they probably weren't going to turn out too much. The third group of people are yourselves who didn't read the bulletin, so thank you for coming. But money's weird, isn't it? It's one of those things that, we read out the list of things that love is, and it's almost like money does the opposite. Money has us sitting here thinking, you earn too much, I don't earn enough, you spend too much, you're not wise with your money, you don't tithe enough, you whatever, you're too rich, I'm too poor, and money just stirs all these emotions up in us, doesn't it? And I'll put my hand up to having a lot of those emotions and having them more than once and a lot of the time. And it's just a weird thing that money is. I was doing some research during the week and watching a clip that actually Kylie sent me, and this guy says there's 500 verses in the Bible that are to do with faith, and there's 500 verses around 500, I should say, to do with prayer. And faith and prayer are these two cornerstone things of our faith, aren't they? Faith and prayer is a cornerstone of faith, of our beliefs. Anyway, then he said there's over 2,300 verses on giving, money, and possessions. That's a huge chunk more. In fact, 16 of the 36 parables that Jesus told have to do with money and possessions and giving. Parables were the primary tool that Jesus used to teach, and so many of them were on this topic. And a sixth of all the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke, again, are to do with giving, possessions, and how we use them. So just so you know, tonight is not speaking about tithing, even though it's called Why Giving. If you really want a tithing sermon, I can do it in about 7 seconds, and that is 10% is a great place to start. Go from there. I'm sure there's reasons 10% isn't correct, but let's start there and see where God takes it, and that's what I had to learn. So, all right, on to the passage tonight. The passage that Pete read out is another passage that we were looking at doing. So I'll read to you from 2 Corinthians chapter 9. So it's verses 1 to 5. I'll wait for you to find your place, as all good Bible readers do. All right, so this is Paul talking to the Corinthians. "There is no need for me to write to you about the service of the Lord's people, for I know your eagerness to help, and I have been boasting about it to the Macedonians, telling them that since last year you in Achaia were ready to give, and your enthusiasm has stirred most of them to action. But I am sending the brothers in order that our boasting about you in this manner should not prove hollow, but that you may be ready, as I said you would be. For if any Macedonians come with me and find that you are unprepared, not to say anything about you, we, not to say anything about you, would be ashamed of having been so confident. So I thought it necessary to urge the brothers to visit you in advance and finish the arrangements for the generous gift you have promised. Then it will be ready as a generous gift, not as one grudgingly given." So a bit of background to this, to these verses. There's Paul was collecting an offering to take back to Jerusalem to the ministers of the gospel there, and so he's with the Macedonians, and he's been boasting to the Macedonians about how much the Corinthians were going to give, and so the Macedonians who don't have much started giving out of their little, and so he's going back through Corinth, and he's wanting to make sure he doesn't get too much egg on his face if the Corinthians aren't giving as much as he said, especially if a Macedonian goes with him, if you get all that. And so he's walking this really interesting tightrope. You know, if you read these chapters, if you read it from a prosperity kind of mindset, it looks very different to a conservative kind of mindset, and it's a really interesting tightrope that he's walking, saying, you know, get it all together. I know you've got the money to give. You've said you would, so come on, guys. Let's get all our stuff together. And so it's an interesting kind of verse there, that section of verses that come together. So there's a lot of concepts in here, but what I want to focus on particularly is 2 Corinthians 9:5. So I thought it necessary to urge the brothers to visit you in advance and finish the arrangements for the generous gift you have promised. Then it will be ready as a generous gift, not as one grudgingly given. And the things I want to focus on there is the finish the arrangements. So preparing. I'm sending someone to prepare in advance, and the generous gift. We know what preparation is, don't we? But to look at what a generous gift is, that word generous is also translated as bountiful gift. So the bountiful gift you have promised, or have your bountiful gift ready. It's preparing, it's putting things aside. You know, I'm personally not a natural giver by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, I was brought up in a family that my mum went to church, but my dad didn't. So that, you know, created some giving issues there. But my family just didn't give. They kept everything pretty much to themselves. And so Kylie and I got married pretty young. And so we had this interesting intersection of the Bray family that gave money very well, and my upbringing that wasn't like that. And so we had to figure out the whole tithing thing. But I also remember sitting in the front room of our house one day, and we were discussing giving extra money to something that was going on here at the church, and being generous basically about something. And the concepts we were trying to wrap our head around was we had a home loan. And so we were saying to each other as we were discussing this, if we pay off the home loan fast, then we'll have the home loan paid off 2 years faster than we would have, which means we would have more money to give to the kingdom and more money to be generous with. And, you know, we're going around in circles thinking about all this kind of stuff. And then we both kind of realized that, you know what, if we don't give out of what we have now, we're not going to give later on when we've done that, because once we've paid our home loan off, we'll invest in something else, and the money will go somewhere else constantly. And so a big eye-opener for me with money was that we are rich right now, and we can plan to be generous with what we have now. It may not be big and may be little, but we can plan to be generous, and that was a big turning point for me personally with how I handle money. The other thing that has struck me about generosity is being in Iraq. So the first day we landed in Iraq, and we walk into an internally displaced persons area of over 5,500 people, and they're living in these basically containers, and you know, they have nothing. They left with nothing, and so they're living on handouts of food and everything each couple of weeks basically. And so as we walk around this camp, people are inviting us in to tell their stories and everything. We walk into one of these containers, and within minutes they come out with this platter of food. These people who have nothing were willing to give us this food, and so it was a real eye-opener to me about what generosity really is. These people, again, they had nothing, but they were willing to give. I recently did the Careforce Life Keys course for the Hub Night last term, and it was a fantastic course. And one of the things it taught me was we reflect what we understand Father God to be. So if we think of Father God to be a judge, then that's how we kind of interact with people and how we live our lives. If we see Father God as harsh, if we see Father God as unfair, that's how we kind of show God to other people. If we see God as gracious, that affects how we do things. If we see God as loving, that affects how we interact with people as well. And so when we're looking here to be generous, I thought the best thing we need to do is to figure out, is Father God generous? Because if Father God's generous and we learn from God himself, then we will then be able to be generous to those around us. So a few verses to have a look at. Yeah, I looked up generous and there weren't many verses about generous or generosity to do with the Father necessarily. And then I realized that we don't have to look too far, do we? He gave us his Son. There is no more. There's no more that someone could do than to do that. And so some verses to show us how generous God is. But God demonstrates his love for us in this, that while we're still sinners, Christ died for us. Why? We're looking at generosity. God's generosity is this. He gave his Son for us. John 15:13, greater love has no man than this, than to lay down one's life for one's friends. And again, it's the same kind of concept, isn't it? God laid down his Son's life for us. The generosity that he showed us is far and beyond anything that we could have asked for. And then even looking at Jesus himself, God made that decision, but Jesus, it says going a little further, he fell with his face to the ground and prayed, my Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me. Yet not as I will, but as you will. You see, Father God is an incredibly generous God. And as I went through these things, I realized that not only is he generous, but he prepared himself to be generous. Way back in the beginning, he knew that what he would have to give from Jesus to be generous for us for salvation. Sorry, I lost my place here for a little bit. So if God is generous, and we believe God is generous, then what does that look like between each of us? How do we plan to be generous and what does it look like to be generous? As I said, giving and generosity aren't my first suits. Hopefully there's a few other people here who have been in my shoes, but they're not what comes naturally to me. And Kylie's taught me so much in this area. So I figured for the case of authenticity, we may as well get the person who's taught me things to come and talk to you rather than me rehashing what she would have said.
My understanding of generosity at work. And the reason he's asked you, as he's sort of semi-explained, is because we have very different financial personalities, and that meant in the very early days of our marriage that we talked and used money very differently, and we come to appreciate there's two financial personalities, and they are the financial nerd and the financial free spirit. This is actually like this is a term that's sort of bandied around in stewardship circles. And so I am the financial nerd, so I like statistics and spreadsheets and numbers and everything to balance. And Bill is the financial free spirit, and he's just really laid back, and he's very generous, and he just kind of goes with the flow. And neither of those are right or wrong when it comes to financial management. They both can work really well. You just need to understand sort of which one you are, because as you can imagine, the financial nerd, me, can sometimes be so tight with money because I'm always planning and saving, and there's retirement and there's mortgages and there's kids' education, and I have in the past struggled to be generous because I could be very, very tight. Financial free spirit can spend everything and have no awareness of their income, and can in fact find themselves in debt. Because they're just, so lovingly just being a free spirit. And so, I really do believe if you understand which one of those you are, it makes a big difference to whether or not you can be generous and what you need to do to be generous. All right, so how is generosity played out? How is it at work? First, I think we really need to understand that we need to accept God's generosity. Everything we have, gifts, talents, material things, resources, it's all God's, particularly in Australia, the whole grass is greener on the other side thing is just ridiculous. The grass is right here, we just have a very blessed life. And so materially speaking, we just need to accept that it's God's. We are conduits of the resources that he gives us. And I think that's a really important truth to bury deep. I think it changes the way we use money when we know where it comes from and whose it is. And, that's just really important. Next, I think we need to plan to be generous. Nothing good usually happens without some intentionality. And so for the financial nerd, planning to be generous looks like getting out that spreadsheet and almost putting a line in there that says generosity. This is this is money I will put aside for whatever God asks of me. And for the financial free spirit, it kind of looks like maybe just when you get your pay, putting $20 aside in your wallet and saying, I'll just leave that there until an opportunity comes up and God's asking me to be generous with it. But whatever you are, you need to be intentional. We are the hands and feet of Jesus, and that doesn't happen by accident. That happens by some intentionality, and our financial personality, we have to work around. And so lastly, I think we just need to submit to our part in God's plan for generosity. We are called to be the salt and light, and we are called to be the hands and feet of Jesus, and we are called to authentic community. And so, we take the resources that are God's, that are given to us. We take our financial personality. We do our best to plan for whatever God might ask us to do, and we submit it to Him, and we say, Lord, I'm going to look for the opportunities that you put in my life to be authentic. And so, for me, that's often, that person looks like they might be struggling. I might just take them out for a coffee, and I've got margin in my budget for that. For Bill, it might be, there's $20 in the back of my wallet. What am I going to do with it? There's this guy at work, and he's really struggling. I don't know what's going on. I'm going to, keep my $20 for a couple of weeks, and I'm going to go out, have a steak with him, or whatever blokes do. It might be spending a little more on our groceries so we can help a neighbour. It might be seeing someone in our church who's lost their job and just could use an extra 50. But we need some intentionality behind this. We need to recognise those three things. Everything is God's. We need to plan to be generous, and we need to submit our plan and God's finances that are within our position at this moment and ask Him, what do you want me to do, Lord? And that's when authentic community comes about, I believe, with our finances.
So, preparing to be generous, that's what we're talking about tonight. How do we prepare to be generous? Now, Kylie shared some things there. And what does it look like? If we prepare to be generous, what does that do to our community around us? Like she said, if you can put a few dollars away then each week, then after a while, you've got enough money to grab Pete and say, hey, let's go have coffee and just, chat about life. All of a sudden, community starts to build, and it's authentic community, because not many of us want to give away money without a bit of love in there as well. So, that's the encouragement to you guys tonight. Paul went to the Corinthians. He asked them to prepare to be generous. And so as we become an authentic community here, that's one of the prongs, I think, of authentic community. How do we prepare to be generous to those here around us and those people in our community?